Well, good morning once again, everybody. So good to see all of you. How many of us were hanging out last week at Easter? Was that awesome? That was awesome. It really was a special day. We were outside and it was warm. My daughter said this morning, like, what if Easter would have been today? So cold. Like, we still would have celebrated the empty tomb. That would have been fine. But man, it wasn't a special day. If you missed it, you have to wait a year till we do that again. But I want to give you a few anticipated updates and celebration points as a church. A couple weeks back, as a church, many of us made commitments toward our new vision campaign called This Is For Everyone. And so many different families, so many different individuals made commitments toward that. And the financial goal, the biggest goal is that we're going to reach the people that we're asking God to help us, use us to reach. Many of their names are on light bulbs in our light bulb wall. That's the hope. It's reaching our ones. We need more space to do that, so we're going to build a building next to us, and our financial goal is $3 million over 3 years, above and beyond our normal giving. The ultimate goal is 100% participation, not really just the finances. So if you're not part of that, man, we'd love to have you still jump in. As of this week, here's the celebration point. We have 315 households have committed $2.4 million toward the campaign. So that's a big celebration. Big celebration point for us. We have around 500 or so households as part of our church, so we have a little bit of a ways to go to get to 100% of everybody. That's a fantastic launch, though. And then this last week, on Easter, we took up our first fruits offering, which is an offering to help us jumpstart the campaign. And many of you showed up, not only in person, and that was awesome too, but many of you showed up through the offering as well. So I'm able to just celebrate with you today. Our first fruits offering last weekend was $201,335.74. That's pretty awesome. This sounds like a lot of money, but that's really a great jump start for us as we're getting going. And if you are not yet part of that, I just want to encourage you. We would sure love to have you engaged in the campaign in whatever way you can financially, as the goal is that we're all in it together. Today we're launching a brand new series. It's called The Missing Piece. And if you are like most people, you have other people in your life, and some of them, many of them, can be complicated. Does anybody fall into that category? We have at least, we know the same people. That's good. Whether it's a difficult marriage, or it's a challenging family member, or it's a coworker that can be extra, or somebody else in your life that causes you a bit of stress, the problem is people in our lives tend to make things messy, don't they? And unfortunately, it's not just them. We actually do that too. And sometimes the way we interact or respond and handle things can even stress us out. And we get worked up in all of our relationships. All of us want, I think I could say safely, all of us want to be better, have better relationships, and be better at relationships. And the great news is God is the greatest expert on relationships. He's not just the one who invented it, which he is, but he's also a relational God. And he wants us to have great relationships. So much of the Bible, especially when you read the New Testament, is about how we live out faith in relationship to each other. He wants the best for us, and that includes how we interact with one another. So we're going to talk about 6 principles that if we really take them to heart, I think could really transform our relationships. I really do. We're going to look at the same root verse or our theme verse every single week. And here it is. It's in the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 18. We're going to read it out loud together this first time today. I want to just encourage you, this is the one to put on your wallpaper on your phone, or, save somewhere where you see things regularly, because we want to commit this to memory. If we do this is kind of the summary of the passage we're going to look at today. So let's say it out loud together. Romans 12, verse 18. Here's what it says. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. I didn't say it was a long verse. It's just a deep verse, right? Do all that you can, as far as it depends on you, to live at peace with everybody else. So often, challenging relationships can strip us of peace. And the question as we launch in today here is it possible? Is it even possible that in your relationships, you sometimes fall short of doing all that you can do? Is it possible that as we understand this and we embrace it more and more and more, that we all have something to learn ourselves about how we can help bring about the missing piece. Is it possible? We're going to start with a principle that's the first one today, and here it is. Start with you. Maybe you didn't see that coming. But it's got to start here, doesn't it? One of the kindest things we can do, not only to other people, but to ourselves, is to not start with what somebody else should do, but to start with ourselves. We got to start with us. So I got my handy dandy little flip chart here today. And here's how things typically work when you think about relationships. We have me or you and another person, and this represents our entire relationship and all the things that go into it, and really mostly the areas that we'd prefer they not be, like some of the tensions or struggles. And what we tend to think is that our problem, at least what we kind of say is that, you know what, I've got some problems, they've got some problems, we both have some things we bring to this. The reasons things aren't always clicking is that, you know, we both got some things. And to be nice, we just kind of say, you know what, it's 50% you and it's 50% me, and if we just meet in the middle, we'll get things worked out, right? But if we're honest, isn't it true that most of this is really not your issue? I mean, you're pretty easy to get along with most of the time. And they've got a lot of things that bug you, don't they? Like if you think about what we really feel, and the relationship is like, yeah, I want to say it's 50-50, but I know better. I know that actually, my portion of this problem is more like that. And all of this is what they've got going on, right? This is all their area. And if they would work on this a little bit, if they would just work on getting better, when is this going to get better, our relationship? Mostly when they get better, because I don't really have that much to work on, right? It's not that big of a deal. And how much power do we have to change anything in this quadrant? Even if, I would argue, if you have a 2-year-old, you have very little control for what's going on. And what if we just focused our energy instead of on like, well, I mean, I'm here. Look, yeah, I got like maybe a little something, but have you seen this? What if we focus instead on our part? We start with ourselves and just recognize that even if our math is right, which maybe not, even if it is, that's the part we can do something about. And when we do something about that, 100% of the relationship is affected when we focus some energy in that quadrant. Start with you. When you get better, 100% of your relationships are going to start getting better. So we're going to camp out in our chapter of our theme verse today. It's Romans chapter 12. The book of Romans was written to a group of Christians in the city of Rome. Rome was like the major city in the first century, preeminent city of the day. The Apostle Paul wrote the book because there was a church that started there by a group of Jews who actually came to faith in Jesus on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. They heard the gospel, they came to Christ, they went back to Rome, they started a church, and the church was growing and flourishing, and yet had all kinds of things and kind of clashes with the culture of their day in Rome. And a lot of it is about the character and love of God and what it looks like to love him, but also how to practically live out faith in relationship. And the passage that we're looking at today is full of incredible wisdom as we look at relationships. Romans chapter 12, verse 9. Let's start there. Romans 12, 9. Don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Hate what is wrong, hold tightly to what is good. Now you notice right out of the gate, the Apostle Paul starts here not by talking about how we need to get other people's stuff sorted out, but he says first take some inventory on ourselves and how we're doing with our part. Anybody can casually love other people. Anybody can just be sort of smile when you walk by, sort of be generally friendly. But this is not what he's talking about. He's saying that we need to get past surface love and have a deep love, a love that genuinely cares more about the other person than it does about what they can give us. Because if we're honest, a lot of our relationships become very transactional. We're looking to gain something. Deep love immediately is about us loving them deeply. And he turns it quickly to say, and hate what is evil. Hate the things in their lives that are evil. Love and purity always go together. Here's the thing about love is you can't really effectively love somebody when you are condoning behavior in their life that you're just totally okay with. It's not really that loving to love evil things in somebody else's life. Now, that's not really the word that we get in culture today. People want to say, like, just love everyone for exactly who they are. Doesn't matter what they do, doesn't matter what they say or what they think. Love them for exactly who they are. Yes, loving them is exactly what we should do. It's the definition of loving them that we have to work out. Truly loving someone means that we're going to recognize the areas of their life that they are doing harmful or evil things that not only hurt them, that hurt other people. And just saying that's fine isn't loving. Imagine if we parented preschoolers the way we tend to say we should treat each other as adults. We still do play dates? Is that still a thing? Okay, so say we had a play date and two moms get together and they're drinking their Starbucks Mocha Grande double pump drink, whatever, okay? And they're having a play date and they're sitting there talking and one kid takes a toy from the other kid, and so the kid who had his toy stolen picks up a 12-inch Power Ranger and just hits the other kid with the Power Ranger. And he starts crying. Now, most parents' response in that moment is what? Are there any parents here today? Hopefully, it's like, no, we don't hit. Be nice to your friend. Let's share. Let's remove all 12-inch Power Rangers for a little while. Be nice to your friend. We're going to share something like that, right? But if we treated that moment the way our culture is suggesting that we treat each other as adults, you know what we'd say? Well, you know how he is. He's always been that way. Violent. He was violent in utero. He kicked me all the time. I mean, he's just been that way, right? Now, maybe an exaggeration. Play dates are probably over. Of course, you get the point that love means that we don't call evil good and good evil, and we actually hate the things in the lives of people that are harming them and that are causing them and other people harm. We love them by loving them through harmful things and not just condoning harmful things. We're not about being hateful to them, but we don't give those areas a complete pass in the name of love. That's not what that does. He says, love each other deeply. Verse 10. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight in honoring each other. There's a bookend of love. He says, take delight in lifting up and honoring. That is living in a pattern of constant and free compliments, always looking for ways to build up somebody else. He does not say that the other person needs to have it all together and that always treats you perfectly or has so many things in their life that are complimentary that you can hardly stop complimenting them. You are just pouring it on because they deserve it. That's not what he says. It's essentially what he's saying is to work hard to find something honorable or worth a compliment, even when there's not a lot to work with. Does anybody have some of those people in their life where you're like, I am really trying to think of something nice right now to compliment you about? Sometimes there aren't a lot of obvious honorable things. He says, find some. And when you're able to genuinely love, even if they don't love you back, you're going to have an easier time finding things when you're pouring love into the other person. When you honor someone else and they aren't even that honorable, enjoy it. Just enjoy living that way. You are giving a gift and without any real expectation of a return, and just be happy about it. You get to offer something that may never come back around, but you get the privilege of loving them well, and there's actually joy in that for us. Now notice these verses, as well as the ones after them, they focus a great deal on what we can do and how we can relate to others more than how we can get them straightened out. We're not even addressing their quadrant. He's saying first we got to clarify ourselves, what we can do, and go into relationship with other people. And it's pretty clear when he, even starting in these first few verses, God's plan is that my life is focused more on others than it is myself. That's his plan, is that my life is focused more on other people than it ever is going to be on myself. He hasn't said anything about how we're going to fix anything else on the quadrant, anything about somebody else. How am I going to help other people treat me better and do a better job? And he hasn't addressed it at all. Instead, it's all about how my life should be about loving and caring for other people with genuine affection and building them up. And friends, that is not our default position. But it is the first step of having the best relationships like God wants us to. If you are not a Christian, you haven't embraced that follow Jesus lifestyle in your life yet, you actually don't have to follow this. I mean, you can choose to do God's things. But God is the expert on relationships, and he's showing us how to make them best. And he says the best way to develop the most meaningful and most fulfilling relationships is actually to not be concerned with what you need and what you want first, but to put the other person first and love them deeply, lift them up, compliment and encourage and honor them. Think of them, give to them. Now, do you ever read the Bible and kind of go, I think I'm good for the day? Like I've read like 3 verses and I'm already completely convicted. We certainly read the Bible and go, I know somebody needs to hear that verse. That one is good for so-and-so. But man, when it starts to get personal and kind of creep in, it's like, well, that was a quick devotional thought. I am good. That is really stepping on my toes. But we're going to keep going anyway, all right? Maybe you're not there yet. Verse 11, never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. Again, the focus is on loving and serving other people and what I need to do, not what somebody else needs to do. And it doesn't make sense naturally, but it makes logical sense that if we're trying to lift them up and actually set the tone to where we're addressing our area, we can handle what's going on here. Don't be lazy and don't naturally cause problems with people as a good way to not pick a fight with other people. When we're lazy, when we don't follow through, when we don't do the things that we're already committed to do, it causes tension with other people. We create friction, and it certainly takes a great deal of patience and prayer to sort out those sorts of things when we're facing them in relationship with somebody else. In this section, he brings God into the equation. It's not just that my life is meant to be focused on other people. He's addressing purpose. My purpose is focused on serving God, not myself. And you notice in every equation that we're in at least second place or worse. Just not what we're being told to live in this world. That somebody else should be the focal point. The passage and the entire series is about relationships, relating to other people, but there's a secret built in, maybe not so secret, and that is that no relationship is only about those two people. Not one of them. It's never like that. In every relationship, our expectations, our hopes, what we've learned from coworkers or family members or whatever, how we were brought up, every relationship, especially for Christians, and we know the good news is that you're not expected to sort this out by yourself. Jesus is right there in the middle of every relationship you have, from a spouse to a coworker to your Uber driver, to help you walk through every bit of it. Every relationship with somebody else is actually a party of 3. And man, let me tell you, that is great news. Have you ever felt like you're in a relationship with somebody else and it's just like, this is not going anywhere. I do not know how we're going to sort this out. In every relationship, that means that we have the global expert, maybe bigger than global, whatever that is. He's present and involved in our relationship the whole time. The one who has all the solutions, the greatest understanding, and cares about us and our situation more than we ever could is in it with us. And beyond that, our purpose has never been to just do better with each other and I would suggest to you, friends, if you're living for yourself or even for your family, really noble thing, and that's your primary focus, you're missing the main purpose that God has for your life. Those are worthy things. They're gifts from God, but they are not intended to be the focal point of this life. In and of themselves, they cannot be fulfilling to our souls. For that, we need Jesus. So once again, the focus is turned off of us and instead of living and loving Jesus every single day. Paul does us a huge favor here by reminding us of that early on in this passage. It's a favor. He is helping us not get frustrated with our expectations of other people, thinking that really in the roundabout way, their job is to make sure we're doing well. We're focused on making sure the opposite happens. So it begins with a question that I think is really important for us to wrestle early on in this series. Who are you living for? I mean, if you were to designate who you're living for, who is it? Who gets the primary focus of your attention? If your life is at its core about you and you're honest, it's about you, it shouldn't really be a surprise that our relationships have a good bit of tension and we are frustrated all the time because nobody else has you in their bullseye. Our expectations are so often out of whack or based on our own needs, and nobody can fully meet that standard or comply with that. And even if our lives are really just about, other people, which is noble, they will always leave us with a void. They were never meant to be the ultimate object of our affection. Tucked right into this lengthy passage about how to deal with each other, Paul reminds us, in case you missed it, it's actually about Jesus. It's always been about Jesus. It's always going to be about Jesus. The point has always been to serve and love him enthusiastically because that's where our purpose comes from. The kindest thing that Paul can do in helping us sort out relationships, the kindest thing that God could ever do in helping us maximize the life that we're living, the kindest thing I could ever do as a pastor is to point us back to the ultimate purpose of why. Why are we put on this earth anyway? To know God and walk with him every day. And in him, we find our purpose, we find our love, we find our joy, our kindness, we find the things that our souls long for. And we're going to talk about a lot of relationship stuff over the next couple weeks. And there's a lot of steps we can take and things we can do, right? But if we miss this, like the core point is that it's not just finding ways to have more pleasing relationships or help do some self-help fix things, but instead to know God and love him fully and deeply, we will just be spinning our wheels for the rest of our lives with other people. Sure, the principles are good and some of them still work, but we will miss the end game. It is in Jesus and through Jesus that we have fullness and purpose, even when the relationship stuff doesn't work out the way we hope. So it's a critical question for us today. Who are we really living for? And in these verses, Paul goes on to tell us how we can do that in relationship with each other as well. Verse 13. When God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. So we should have eyes, be ready to help people in need, and be eager to be hospitable. This is living with eyes that see the needs around us. Not just trying to fulfill the needs we have personally. It could be as simple as sometimes as looking for what is happening in somebody else's life and leaning in or opening our homes more to other people. Sometimes we don't want to use our homes and open our homes as much because we haven't done a deep clean and there might be a laundry basket somewhere. But this idea of hospitality is about pouring into the relationship of other people, not worrying about what they're going to think about us as much, but looking for ways to help meet their needs. Remember, it's not about us. So Paul helps us by teaching us that we can focus more on how we love them, how we serve them, how we care for other people, and that helps us understand even ourselves and our own needs differently. They may not have been the expectations that you were thinking when we started talking about relationships today. That basically we're just focusing on this one little quadrant, right? When you think maybe we've covered all the things that we need to about ourselves and maybe it's time to move on to some other people and how we can fix them. He goes on in verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. Don't curse them. Pray that God will bless them. Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Well, wait a minute, that's still about what I need to do. Yes, it is. And it actually raises the bar, doesn't it? Some people in our lives actually are a blessing, and they are life-giving, and they are kind and loving at times, and sometimes we just have a little bit of tension we want to work out. And then some people take quite a bit more extra ounce of patience and grace. Some of them even seem out to get us. Have you met those people? Like, why are you against me like that? Why? And you know what he says to do to them? Bless them. Bless the people who come against you. If someone comes at you, return fire with blessing. Now that is not our natural response, is it? Does anybody feel that naturally? Like, I just want to bless you every time you say mean things to me. And verse 15 gives us this little nugget that is so powerful if we can embrace it. He's already addressed the kind of intentional and generous love we're called to live. He's also addressed how we should feel about evil. But notice this one directional kind of expression. Pray in the lives of other people. There's no qualifier, he says. It doesn't seem to matter if the other person is a terrible husband or a bad coworker or a bad mom of another kid or a super mean boss or whatever it is. He says, bless them. Bless them. Pour out blessings to them. The expectation is that our desire is for God to bless every person in our path, even when, frankly, we don't feel like they deserve a whole lot of blessing. Sometimes it's hard to bless when we're like, oh, it's just a little bit of blessing. Like they don't need a lot. Look at them. They're not doing so great. And sometimes it seems like other people, despite the way they act, are getting an awful lot of blessing. So maybe we just need to redirect our prayers. Lord, I see a lot of blessing happening over there with that jerk. And I just wish you would redirect some of that blessing this way. And I'll help you. I will help you pull some of it back, God. Not what he says. There's no qualifier. Even when someone is coming directly against you or saying hurtful and criticizing things, bless them. I doubt you're going to hear that on Oprah. That's countercultural, right? Like he gives us this verse to tell us it's not going to look like how everyone else handles it. Then he says, when they're happy, be happy. When they're weeping, weep. Remember the context in the previous verse is about the people who are not holding up their end of the bargain on any relationship. They're actually coming against us. He says, when they're happy, be happy. And when they weep, weep. Here's the thing. That includes when we don't fully agree with their weeping or their tears. He's been really clear about straight up evil, right? If somebody is celebrating and rejoicing in how they took advantage of somebody else or they bulldozed somebody or something like that, that's evil. We're not going to celebrate that. We don't celebrate that. But in general, instead of first casting our judgment or our opinion on somebody else and what they're thinking or feeling, just sit in it with them. They're feeling it deep, so feel it with them. Let them know that you're present in their emotional experience before we give a qualifier of what we really think or feel about it, right? Live in it with them. It doesn't mean that we have to ever fully agree with their celebration or with their tears. Maybe they are way more upset than we think they are. Like, you are really upset about this, not a big deal. Well, that's not a good place to start. It doesn't mean we have to fully agree. Doesn't mean we have to even ever get there. It means we sit with them in their weeping, in their celebration. Love them where they are. Verse 16. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. And if you just thought, I don't. Verse 17, never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see that you are honorable. I saw this movie on a plane a few years. I mean, whenever I watch a movie on a plane, it feels like I fail. It's like, oh, that was terrible. I usually turn them off. I watched part of this movie. I can't even tell you what it was. There's two different groups, two different sides of town, and they're kind of like gangs. And one group does something to a guy's car on the other side of town as a kind of a mean prank. And so they all get fired up and they become kind of a gang, and then they go on the other side of town and mess up all the cars. It's a retaliation. And so that group is like, oh no, they didn't. And they retaliate by going over and blowing up a car. And that turns into that group going back over and blowing up an entire house. And those guys are like, I can't believe they blew up a house. They retaliate by going back over to the other side of town and just shooting bullets all upside all the buildings, businesses, homes, everywhere, of course, affecting lots of innocent people. And then those guys are like, they shut up our town. They go back over and they start shooting at each other, and a bunch of them die, and that's when I turned it off. I'm like, I'm done. That's the plot of the movie. And here's the question. What is the point? I mean, of course, our nature is return evil with evil. That's our nature. And not a lot of evil, just a little bit more evil than what they did, right? Because we want to be like, no, stop. And like we want to make sure they know we got it. We saw it, and we got you back. But here's my question. Has it ever worked? Has it ever worked? When somebody yells at you and you yell back a little bit louder, do they go, oh my goodness, bring it in? I'm so sorry. Like when someone says a sharp word to you and you put them in their place, do they go, oh my goodness, you are so right? I mean, very rarely. When somebody wrongs you and you find a way to send a jab back to them, you don't become best friends right away usually. Right? Our natural relationship solutions don't work that well. And God's way is always going to be counterintuitive and countercultural. It's not going to be what everybody else is doing, but it is going to be what works. And it doesn't start with them. It starts with me. And that lands us to our last verse, our theme verse. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. You're not going to have all the answers. There's not a perfect formula for every situation. The formula is do all you can to live at peace. Again, you see who holds the reins through this entire passage. It's not about what somebody else needs to do to meet you and your needs and serve you better. We will touch on some of those things, but for the most part, the things that we can control is what we can do. So in every relationship, I have to honestly ask the question, in what areas am I stopping short of all that I can do? That's what he says, do all you can do. In what areas am I stopping short of doing all I can do? Are we holding back and waiting for somebody else to meet us in the middle and do their part where subconsciously we're like, they got a lot of work to do to make peace? Am I really thinking that it's a 75-25 or worse? And if they would just shape up, you know what's probably not going to happen? A 55% divorce rate tells us it doesn't work. It doesn't. God's way starts with me. So let's start what we know we can do. 100% access to what we say and what we do. And we'll take some steps forward from there. Let's pray. Lord, it is hard to look in the mirror. It is challenging to see things that will convict us and challenge us, and yet we are wanting to know from you the best ways to live the life you've given us, to honor you, to live it out. Would you help us to just take to heart and apply to life the things that your word is calling us to? We pray in the power and the name of Jesus. Amen.